Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Witch's Castle. I'm Will Castle, and today we're going to be talking about a new commander from Aetherdrift. Today we're looking at Hashaton, Scarab's Fist. So he's a cycling commander for this build. He comes in the Zombies Precon, Eternal Might, I believe it's called, and he's the alternate commander. So he's a 2-cost commander, and he says whenever you discard a creature card, you may pay 2 and a blue. If you do, create a tapped token that's a copy of that card, except it's a 4/4 black zombie, and he's a 1/3. So he came in the zombie precon. The zombie precon I picked up, actually. I'm fidgeting with some of these cards to build this particular deck. But I read this and wanted to take him in a cycling direction. I really like cycling as a mechanic, so yes, he makes zombies, but I care more about the fact that it's value for discarding cards, so there's not as many cards in this particular build that care about zombies. If you prefer the more zombie-heavy theme of the commander deck, the precon does actually have a decent amount of good zombie-themed cards in it. You'll just want to go through and pick out some of the cycling pieces and set them aside. It's kind of divided between being a zombies deck and a pseudo-cycling deck. I'll show you some of the cards that I'm talking about here, so you know what to look for in terms of like the cycling parts. But yeah, let's get into what we've got going on here. So I've got one Planeswalker in the list right now, and it's Teferi. It's Teferi Master of Time specifically, just for the ability to potentially instant speed, draw, and discard cards on other people's turns and turn them into creatures, because this doesn't say it activates only as a sorcery. So since Teferi's first ability, and all of his abilities, can be activated once on each person's turn, regardless of it, whether it's yours or an opponent, you potentially could use this as a way to get a creature out that you want to use as interaction. Target creature you don't control phases out, also allows you to protect him and yourself a little bit better, and the take 2 extra turns after this one. It's an ultimate that if it happens, you probably just win the game, but we've discussed before my philosophy in terms of Planeswalkers. If the first ability is something that I care about, then I'm going to run it just because that first ability is something I care about, and the presence of a Planeswalker will divert people's attention to it, and the people it doesn't divert the attention to will just let you win the game with it. So there's kind of just, we're at that point with Planeswalkers now where you're either going to get them interacted with or they're going to run away with the game, and somebody's going to be like, oh my god, the Planeswalker ruined the game, and you're sitting there like, dog, I told you 3 times that you could attack it. But yeah, he's in here. That's just good value, and card draw is something that we're going to want because our commander incentivizes card disadvantage. So we're going to try and make up for the fact that we are actively getting rid of cards to make some of these creatures. Get into some of our creatures here, and you'll find that most of them have cycling. That's kind of the gimmick here. So Angel of Ruins has cycling, and it's plane cycling specifically. I'm running a lot of the land cycle creatures in here because it's an Esper deck. Mana selection and advantage is kind of hard for us at times, so being incentivized to play cycling cards is already good for us. Being incentivized to play cycling cards that also can get us lands will help us make sure we have the color mana we need to activate the abilities that we need to activate. Archfiend is in here as board control. Obviously, all the cycling and discarding you do will put plenty of counters on things and make sure that the board doesn't get too out of hand as long as this guy's sticking around. Architects of Will is just kind of fun. It's a generic cycling card. There's a handful of dudes in here that are only in here because they cycle. The rest of the words on it don't matter as much. Eagles of the North is a plain cycling card. It will sometimes do something relevant. Let's see here. Scion of Darkness. You can yoink creatures out of other people's graveyards, which is neat, but like, with as expensive of a mana cost as he has, you're more incentivized to cycle him and pay with Hashaton, because you're still paying less than you would just straight up casting this dude. We're running Sanctum Plowbeast and the Jehessen zombies in here. Again, the land cycling is really good, and these guys being able to go get either or is super helpful. And we are running plenty of dual lands in here that are both types. Like, we've got the Prairie Streams and the Hallowed Fountains and whatnot in here. So, ultimately, there's a lot of crossover in what I either can get already. I just like the functionality of, oh, hey, this lets me go get that or that, if I've already gotten one or two of those lands earlier in the game. We're running something, Vizier of Tumbling Sands in here. It's a cycling card innately already, and it's got some untapped synergies. We're running some of that because we've got Walking Atlas in here, we've got Scare Tiller in here. We're also running Shorakai because of the card draw and the card discard. But we're running those synergies because this card mostly. We are doing a lot of land cycling. We'll put a lot of lands into our hands, but not necessarily into play. So we're running a small package of ways to just get extra lands into play after we've already put them into our hands. And since this card already cycles, it was easy to kind of justify to myself putting that line in here to be able to put those lands into play. Same with Scare Tiller. He actually cares more about being tapped, but you'll see later in the video here that we have a card that we can use in junction with Vizier to tap the Scare Tiller and then untap it and retap it. Sir Conrad's in here because he's a potential win con. If you can't get any of your creature tokens to stick, like you just really can't get the mana around to get them to stick, using something like Sir Conrad to cycle through and still get some damage in while you try and catch up sometimes, it'll help kind of divert some of the attention to him instead of some of the other pieces you need to actually maintain control. People are now aware enough that Sir Conrad just can run away with games that he either will run away with the game for you or divert people's attention to him while you try to establish another way of winning. We're also running the alternate commander in here, Temet Noctumen's Will, just because when you draw a card and discard a card line is super solid. He incentivizes cycling as well, so he kind of fits into the Hashaton deck, but Hashaton doesn't necessarily fit into the Temet deck, I feel, if that makes sense. And him buffing the zombies is convenient because we are making zombie tokens. There's even one or two zombies in here innately that just happen to cycle. This card is super, a lot better in this deck than it should be. If you're really stuck and you've only got like one or two cards left in your hand and you've already cycled this guy, sometimes it's just better to try and cycle him and the other cards in your hand more. Like, he functionally gives the cards in your hand cycling. It's just cycling for him, as long as he's in your graveyard. And it would be better for you to sometimes have a card that you can really cycle than a card that you can't. So he just ends up actually being secret MVP sometimes when you're stuck in a bad situation. Other than that, let's see here. Nezahal, Hoarding Broodlord, those are two of our bigger, scarier creatures. Mondrak, obviously, we can make multiples of each of those tokens. That's just bananas for us. Because a lot of the tokens we're making aren't always going to be big, scary creatures. Sometimes we're plain cycling an Eagles of the North, and we get a 4-4 version of it. But plain cycling an Eagles of the North and getting two 4-4 versions of it feels much, much better. Emeria Shepherd's in here because we can specifically land cycle 4 plains cards, so we're more likely to be able to get it to return permanents consistently to play than just to our hands. Hoarding Broodlord is in here as a tutor option, and with our commander, if we have a free discard outlet, something like Scourge Familiar or Rettomb Mystic, it's not free, but cycling good, we can functionally make a cheaper version of it. And yes, it has Convoke, so it'll already be potentially cheaper depending on how many tokens we have. But there are some lines that reanimate creatures, and it might just be better to go for make a token, tutor for a reanimate line, use reanimate line to get Broodlord, tutor for whatever you were actually looking for. Because getting 2 of those bodies in play might just be more advantageous at the time. Sometimes you do just need more big flying idiots. Rettomb Mystic, this is one of those cards I was talking about that is more on the cycling theme in the deck. It doesn't not make sense in Temet because he already draws and discards and he wants you to draw more cards to pump your dudes. But it feels like Temet needs you to have the specific zombies more than Hashaton does. Hashaton doesn't need you to have specific zombies because you can just discard good value creatures and get good value. Temet kind of needs good support pieces for his attack line to work. So forcing you to sometimes make the decision between discarding those things because they have cycling and could buff your guys versus just choosing to remove that option so you can push a more consistent plan. I think it's just better to push the more consistent plan. Sometimes giving yourself too many options is a bad thing because it can overwhelm you. And this is a really good card. I like it a lot. I'm going to play it in decks that aren't even this one. But in terms of how the precon functions, it's probably not one you actually end up keeping around if you want to use Temet as the long-term commander for it. And I still think Temet's really good. I'm planning on building both of these guys because I really like Esper Zombies and I've been waiting for it to be good. But for this deck, he's just more cycling themed, so I yoinked this card for the cycling version of the deck. I also put this thing in here. This is the Monstrosity of the Lake. It's a big dingus idiot that has island cycling, so sometimes we just get to put a token of it into play. And because it enters the battlefield is not a cast trigger, it is a ETB, you can still choose to pay that 5 mana and tap all the creatures and put stun counters on them. So that's still pretty okay. Ultimately, if you island cycle him, pay the 3 and pay the 5, you're still paying the mana cost of the card itself, plus what the mana cost would be if you wanted to activate the ability. But you're also getting an island. So why not pay the same amount of mana to just get the card advantage? And admittedly, it puts that card, the Monstrosity, into your graveyard for later graveyard synergies. So it's just good and fun. I like big scary Krakens, and this one has island cycling. So that's just an easy include for me. Nezahal draws you a bunch of cards and gives you a discard outlet. A big, dumb, scary dinosaur, very good. That was Nezahal. Let's see here. I think that's it, honestly, in terms of anything super interesting. Sun Titan, generic value. Eternal Dragon can come out of your graveyard and also can just exist on your graveyard. So, Cloud of Fairies. This is one of those untapped 2 lands kinds of cards, and it's a creature with cycling, so we put it in here. Sometimes mana value is really good, and getting a token copy of it that is a 4/4 feels pretty good sometimes. If you have one of the lands that taps for 2 and a blue, you're functionally getting that token for free, it feels like, because that fairy will come in and untap it for you. You do have to pay the 2 to cycle this, unless you don't, which we'll get to in a moment. It's pretty light on sorceries and instants. It's a creature-heavy deck, admittedly. We've got 3 sorceries. They're all board wipes. One of them is Living Death. It can help you get all of the creatures you've cycled back from your graveyard into play. And also, it does the same thing for everybody else, but, like, if you do your job right, they won't have the things that you're most concerned about, or you'll be getting rid of the things you're most concerned about with the first half of it. And then we've got Dam in here because it's just another generically good board wipe. I like playing cards that say the word cannot be countered on them because I don't like, well, no, I don't not like counterspells. I love counterspells. I like using counterspells. I don't like having cards that I'm like, okay, I need this one to stop my opponent for surezies, being able to be stopped. So if I'm looking for a card that does that, if I have an option to play an uncounterable version, I do. And that's what Supreme Verdict's in here for. That's what Dovin's Veto is down here for. Uncounterable counterspell. In our instance section, we're also fairly light. It's mostly interaction. These cards are not necessarily here to be the synergy part of our deck. We're letting all the cycling do most of that work for us. We've got Rites of Refusal is a spicy one in here. It's a counterspell that lets you discard some cards, and they have to pay for each one, but it lets you discard cards, so at instant speed on somebody else's turn, you can discard cards and make tokens and help protect yourself at the expense of irritating them because you countered something in order to do it. But, frankly, sometimes people need to be irritated. Reborn defenses populate, making tokens that are copies of our tokens is really good, and giving them indestructible, also really good. We are choosing to put creatures from our hands into our graveyard and bank on the fact that these tokens will do the work for us. Having a couple ways to protect those tokens is going to be very crucial. Intellectual Offering is fun. Getting to untap all your non-land permanents makes it easier for you to discard and make tokens, and drawing cards makes it easier for you to have cards to discard to make tokens of. Yeah, you're helping out your opponents a little bit, but also you're an Esper deck with a counterspell and a Cyclonic Rift. So, frankly, do it. Like, it's not going to hurt them to let them have, like, 3 cards in hand when this is what we're doing. We're running Teferi's protection for Lord's sake. Like, we can let them have a couple cards. We can let one opponent have a couple cards. That's not a big deal. The untapping somebody's stuff could be a big deal, but if you just Cyclonic Rift before you do this, then you're kind of a bully, but also you're probably gonna kill somebody, which is the goal. In Magic, the Gathering. Don't cancel me, YouTube. I've been around for 3 weeks, man. Give me a break. Okay. Scooching down into our artifacts section, we have mostly just the same generic artifacts, mana rocks you're used to. We'll go over some of the key ones here. We've got Ashnod's Altar. Sacrificing tokens for 2 mana will make it easier to pay for the next token. We've also running Phyrexian Altar for the same reason. It gives us a specific color. So if we have a bunch of mana, but it's not all blue mana that we need to activate the ability, having Phyrexian Altar around might help us mitigate that a little bit. Shorekai is just a generically good card draw value engine for us. It discards cards, it makes tokens to protect us, and it is part of a combo in this deck that we'll get to right now, actually, with Mind Over Matter. This card is one of the ways you win with this deck. It's just choose and discard a card, tap or untap target artifact, creature, or land. So the way that this goes with Shorekai is you do need to have Shorekai and this Teferi's Ageless Inside Out, because this card makes it so if you would draw a card, if it isn't the first one you've drawn, you draw 2 instead. So now the Shorekai taps to draw 4 cards and discards 1 card to make the pilot token. That leaves you with 3 extra cards and three cards in hand. You use 1 to discard and activate Mind Over Matter to untap Shorekai. You use another to discard a card and untap a land. Then you use the land to tap Shorekai and draw 3 cards, or 4 cards, discarding 3, putting you back to 4 now. So you net 1 every single time. It goes infinite. You can also use that 1 to make extra mana and just discard that card to untap or tap a mana rock. That's the main infinite combo, like, win con in the deck. It's not always what you're going to be wanting to do, but if your game is running late and you're really behind and you just have enough resources to look for a way to win, this is one of the better ones. It gets you card advantage. Even if it gets interacted with, 1 or 2 of those pieces will still likely stick around if it's not a board wipe, so they'll still be able to provide you enough advantage to recoup a little bit. And this card helps with the synergies we were talking about earlier with the Scare Tiller and what's it called? The Robot Walking Atlas. This helps with that synergy too. But that also means that these tokens that Shorekai produces, you make infinite of them, so you can produce infinite mana via these altars now if you have 1 or both. You could get either infinite colorless or infinite colored mana, which does also help with the Shorekai line. You need 1 less card to discard if you have one of these altars in play, because you don't need to untap anything. You just use the token it makes. So in that case, you could go infinite with just the Mind Over Matter, Shorekai, and Phyrexian Altar. Because Shorekai draws you 2, but you have to discard 1. Oh, no, you can't, because you need 2 cards to be able to discard. Because you need to be able to... No! I'm correct. If you have Shurikai, Phyrexian Altar, and Mind Over Matter, you can go infinite because you pay 1, tap, draw 2, discard 1, make 1/1/1. Discard the 1 card, activate Mind Over Matter, untap Shurikai, sacrifice the 1/1/1 to Phyrexian Altar to make a colorless mana, and use the colorless mana to tap Shurikai and draw 2 cards and repeat the process. I had to slow it down and think it through for a second. But yeah, you can go infinite that way as well. Same is true for Ashnod's Altar. It actually nets you a colorless mana, so it goes infinite plus infinite colorless mana. And the whole engine produces card discard triggers. So anytime you realize you have the infinite mana lines, you can now use those triggers to pay to bring those creatures back. So you'll just cycle through your whole friggin' deck and put all the best creatures you want into play, which is kind of silly. And one of the main ways you try to win in this deck, which is just true of most reanimate decks. I find if you're playing a reanimation style deck, your goal is eventually to just put all of your creatures into play. You're just trying to do it from your graveyard. In this case, we're kind of mixing it a little bit. We're also running Fluctuator in here. Cycling abilities cost 2 less to activate. That makes most of the cycling in this deck free. I think there's 1 or 2 cards. No, there's probably like 3 or 4 cards collectively that would be 1-cost cyclers. But for the most part, that makes the cycling in this deck borderline free, which is what you want, because not having to pay for that and then getting to pay to make a token of it, just better. We're also running a new card in here. This is Cryptcrawler Chariot. Whenever you discard 1 or more cards, create that many tapped 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. This also, in theory, goes infinite with Shurikai, Phyrexian Altar, and the Mind Over Matter, because it just gives you another body to sacrifice to the altar. Anything that actually discards you cards and makes you this will also make you another mana or 2 with the other altars. But also, it's just generically good. Every time we cycle, we make a zombie token is really good. We're running the discard 2 cards, make a 2/2 zombie token. So we like making zombie tokens. They're a good way to help protect us if our cycling clone plan is not going the way we want it to immediately. Ageless Insight is in here because combo piece, and also we need the card draw. If we're choosing to discard cards as often as we are, we need to get extra cards. This makes that better. Anointed Procession makes extra tokens of our zombies. And also, it's Egyptian themed because it came out in Amonkhet. So I thought it was fun, and I just wanted to put it in here. And I think overall, this is something fun I wanted to talk about. We are going to go over some of the lands today because we're running a desert package. We're running this desert package because it is also themed around the Amonkhet stuff. I was playing Magic. I had just started when things like Hour of Devastation were starting to come out. So I played Magic when a lot of these early stirrings of Esper zombies were starting to exist, and when these deserts decks were starting to like dominate standard because they were burning people out. This doesn't have the burn deserts stuff in it because it's not red, but I like deserts, so I put them in here personally for flavor and fun reasons. The main reason to use them is this Lazotep query for this deck, because we can use it to exile creatures from our graveyards to make 4/4 zombies, just like our commander does. So this gives us another route to make value out of the fact that we've discarded cards and want to turn them into creatures. You need to sacrifice a desert to be able to do that, though, so we're running a handful of deserts to do that. I think we're running maybe 14 or 15 deserts. Glorified, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay, yeah. We have 14 deserts in here. So in theory, you have up to 14 creatures you could make into those if you happened to find all 14 deserts. It feels okay to get away with something like this as a weird land sub-theme because we have so many land cycling cards in the deck. That makes it easier for us to go and guaranteed get the ones we need to play, and the deck will just naturally feed us the more fun, flavorful ones as it naturally progresses through the game. That's my theory anyway. We have enough card advantage that we can just pick out the ones we need to play, and then the other ones will pop up kind of naturally as they're supposed to in the game. And also, I just like deserts and wanted an excuse to play them, so they're in here. We're also running Sunken Hollow, Sunken Hollow, wow. Yeah, we are running Sunken Hollow. We're running all of these weird two-color dual land types because they're fetchable with the land cycling. Takanuma, Abandoned Mire, milling cards, returning creatures, it's pretty okay. Unholy Grotto, putting a zombie from our graveyard on top of our library. You'll note that there's not a whole lot of zombies in the deck, but you'll also note that our commander is a zombie, and he is a 2-cost, but there's been a lot of people hyping this card up as super broken. And it is. There's so many different builds you can take this in. There's a bunch of scary potential with it. Some people are potentially going to hyper-target it out of the game. So Unholy Grotto will give you access to getting your commander back from your graveyard and just subverting command tax. Because having that ability cost as much as it does makes wanting to pay that command tax a lot harder. There's also some noteworthy zombies to want to get back. We do have Temet in here. We have the Ret 2 Mystic. Jehessen Zombies, actually, unironically, because you can cycle it, getting to put it back on top of your library over and over again and make copies of it is pretty okay if you're stuck in a pinch. We're also running Terrain Generator. This is in here for the same reasons that the Walking Atlas is just a way to put the lands that we've cycled for from our hand into play. And that actually is it for this deck. I'm really excited about Hashaton, and also about Temet. I just really like the Esper Zombies stuff. I grew up right in like the late... I was born in 2000, so I grew up watching things like The Mummy and the Mummy movies because they came out in like the late 90s. So it's kind of nostalgic for me because they're all mummy themed. I really like all of the Egyptian mummy zombies, so I'm just excited about it for that. And this card giving me a kind of new weird outlet to take cycling into is a lot of fun. I'm very happy with this, and I think Aetherdrift's a super cool set. There's a lot of stuff in it that I'm interested in messing with. You'll probably be hearing about it in future videos. So yeah, that's it for today. Thank you guys all so much for watching. Again, I've been Will Castle. This is Witch's Castle. If you liked the video, if you could do me a favor and go ahead and subscribe if you want to stick around and watch more stuff. If you could like it because you liked it, or you like me because I have cool hair, and if you could ring the little bell so that you know when I'm making new videos, that would be super cool. That all boosts the algorithm, makes it easier for the content to get seen. It's easier for me to get feedback, truthfully. Like, I put these deck techs out there, it's easier for me to get better as a player from outside feedback. I thrive off of outside feedback personally, so getting to interact with people and discuss decks is super cool and fun to me, and that's my desire with this project, is to share everything with people, share these commander decks, and share ideas with people. So interacting with all of the little clicky buttons and sharing the links with all your friends makes it easier for me to get feedback and engage with all of you guys. So if you could do me that favor, I'd appreciate it a lot. And as always, I will see you guys in the next video.